right. Welcome, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Double Take with AWL Podcast, created and normally hosted by Jen Slate and Melissa Maloney.
It's okay, Shirley. I just got married. My name is changed. It's okay. Don't worry about
It's all
it. It's
good.
okay. It's all good.
All right, I'm gonna get it right. I'm gonna get it right. Okay. Today, we're diving into a bold question raised by the New York Times. Did liberal feminism ruin the workplace? And our take is no, it revealed it. So today's conversation is going to unpack what that means through the lens of emotional intelligence, intersectionality, and real leadership practice. I'm your moderator, Shirley Brooks, and I'm joined by AWL Partners co-founders Jennifer M. and Melissa M. Along with our content strategist, Faustina Cardinal, who brings the next generation lens to this conversation. So we're going to get right into it. Ready, ladies?
Ready.
All right. So first, I just want to get everybody's reaction. When you first saw the headline, did liberal feminism ruin the workplace, and can conservative feminism fix it? What came up for you? It's open to everyone, obviously, to answer, but I think we're going to start with the youth today.
Perfect.
Start us off. What were your thoughts when you first heard it, saw it?
I think I mainly just wondered, what in the world is conservative feminism? I mean, what is it doing? Because it kind of sounds like an oxymoron of sorts. So I had a lot of questions about that, and I was curious to learn more. But my initial reaction wasn't a positive one. I'll just say that.
Well, how about you, Mel? What was your first thought?
Honestly, curiosity. Like there was so much. It blew up real fast, and so that always it just always makes me go, what's everyone got so emotional about? Like what's going on? And so I was truly like, okay, well let's listen to this. And I don't think I had a ton of initial reaction because I tend to not get super committed to headlines until I see the content. So I just kind of was like, okay, well, guess I'm doing this later today. Have to dig in.
Yeah, a little bit. Jennifer, what about you?
So when I saw the headline, I'm like, oh, this is good marketing, really good headline, right? Because it gets you thinking. I did, but like Mel, I wasn't sure because you see the headline, that doesn't mean that's what it's about. And so I was more curious to kind of figure out, okay, what is this? I just wanted to know more.
I think I'm desensitized to headlines after the last like 6 years in social media.
Right, it's like it's perfect. Yeah. Well, question for everyone, and I'll start with Mel, though. You can answer first. Do you think feminism actually changed the workplace, or did it just make longstanding inequities more visible?
I was really thinking about this question, and I feel like there's so much nuance to this question in terms of how the workplace has actually changed over, like, I've been in the workplace for 30-ish years now, 32-ish years. And if I just think about how much it's evolved, but I think, has feminism had an impact on it? Yes. Have generational changes have an impact on it? Yes. Has just how culture in general has changed? Yes. Like it's so nuanced that I think we're paying attention to things more now, and we may not have before. And I don't know, I always go back to like Mad Men, and you look back at like what Mad Men look like, and it's definitely, feminism has had an impact on the Mad Men culture of an office for sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what? To just add to that, I have to completely agree. And I think that the headline makes it seem like it's just feminism, but like Melissa said, it's a whole lot of things. Like if you think back to when we were children, doctors could smoke in the doctor's office with you, right? When you're in there. Today, unheard of. Can't even think
Right.
of that, right? It's
Yeah.
like culture completely changes how we do things within the workplace as well. So it's more than just feminism. There's a
Mhm.
lot that goes into it. I think thinking that it's just the one thing is very short-sighted.
Very good point. Very good point. What do you think, Faustina?
Um, needless to say, I'm new to the labor force, but
Why are you taking this
from the perspective of even just applying for a lot of jobs and seeing the job postings, or even, extending beyond the workplace, whenever you do go to a doctor's office and you have to fill in a form where you click on every single identity that you're a part of. I think there's a fine line between performative activism and what we've come to define as wokeness, which is something that the New York Times talks about. And there's a lot of identity politics with that. Um, and so I don't think feminism necessarily is kind of this paradigm that has changed things for the worse. I think if we look at it as maybe a tool for understanding certain maybe systems of oppression, we'll understand workplaces and how they've come to shift a lot more. For example, HR policies and how we've come to understand how people can be more included or excluded by certain things. I think feminism does a good job at that.
All right, okay. I love all the different the variety of answers. Okay, so what do you think people are reacting to when they say feminism went too far? Like, and anybody can answer, whoever feels most inspired by that.
Well, so I it's funny because the other day I sat on a panel and we had watched the viewing of Prime Minister. It's talking about the former Prime Minister of New Zealand,
Cinda.
Jacinda, thank you, Jacinda Ardern. And the question came up about how men lead, how women lead. And even with this, I really don't think it's about gender necessarily. Like, yes, it plays a part, but we have had amazing workplaces led by men, and we've had amazing workplaces led by women. I'm not sure if it's about the gender as much as it is about emotional intelligence, right? I really believe that you can have either gender in a role and it's not good, either gender in a role and it's absolutely amazing. So I think we're asking the wrong question, like when we're talking about this subject sometimes.
Okay.
And I think like I think there's some I'll say some feminist principles that I think coming into the workplace are great principles in things like, you know, being more inclusive, trying to ask people what's important to them, and things that fall into what would be categorized as feminist principles in some ways. But at the same time, I would say, but is that feminism, or is that actually just, is it emotional intelligence? Is it just, you know, leading in a different way? I think, and we'll get into it, obviously, I think I struggled with some of the things that there was a lot of connection in the talk around, you know, behaviors, I'll call them behaviors of women versus behaviors of men. And it's funny because I challenge that these are typical behaviors of women and behaviors of men. I think they are, like, one of the ones, and again, I'm jumping ahead, I'm sure, but one of the things they talked about is gossip, right? And, you know, saying that women are gossipy, and I'm like, worked with a lot of gossipy men, like a lot of gossipy men. And so I'm like, so it always makes me just go, how did that become a female characteristic? Like, who decided that was a female characteristic, and that side of things? So it's yeah, it's interesting. And I think and Jen can obviously speak for herself, but I think I grew up in a time where when I was starting to really enter the workforce, where being identified as a feminist was not necessarily what I wanted to be, because it was very male bashing and it was deemed like stuff that I didn't connect with in that wave of feminism. And I don't want to speak for Jen, but I know Jen and I've had conversation about, you know, the fact that Black women haven't really been pulled along in the feminist movement throughout the years. And so it's so interesting that, again, we're putting this one word and we're all expected to fit into it. And that, I think, is huge.
Yeah, and yeah, and I'm glad you mentioned that, Mel, because I wanted to just add in there, when we're talking about feminist principles and inclusion for whom?
Yeah.
Right? Because feminism historically has not really been good at including all people who identify as women, right? So yeah.
Well, this is a lot. We're gonna go straight to, so we kind of, for the audience, we broke this up in 2 sections, and so this next part that we'll kind of focus on is the liberal versus the intersectional feminism. So that's where these questions will be focused next, and we're going to start with you, Faustina. Can you explain to our listeners, when we say liberal feminism versus intersectional feminism, what do we mean?
Yeah, and I think this ties in perfectly with what Mel and Jen were talking about. So basically, liberal feminism, or what we've come to define as liberal feminism, it emerges from second wave feminist thought. So from the 70s, kind of 70s to 90s, I would say. And it basically seeks to make public some issues that were previously privatized. So household issues, domestic work, you know, spousal sexual harassment, or any kind of assault that was previously seen as something that was private and not discussed legally. So it's kind of twofold. And then it also brings economic liberalization, hence liberal feminism. And this is when women, particularly white women, sought to make themselves equal to their male counterparts and reach this level of masculinity in a way to win this like economic game of success and climb the corporate ladder that we all know. So yeah, this branch of feminism is again often critiqued for being too narrow and exclusionary. When it first started up, we see a lot of white women excluding any other type of women from any type of marginalized identity form, be it trans women, Black women, Indigenous women. They were kind of pushed to the sidelines because speaking about any other systemic issue was going to take away attention from the fact that they wanted this economic liberalization and promotions and credit cards, which again, obviously is important, but let's not forget any other kind of intersectional identity. So in contrast, intersectional feminism seeks to bring light to the idea of a multi-layered intersectional identity. So what this basically means is generational poverty, issues with historical systemic oppression. If your community where your family historically has lived in was previously redlined, especially in Canada and the United States, any type of issue like this that makes you have inaccessibility to transportation or safe transportation, makes you live right next to a highway, which is very unhealthy. All of these issues are feminist issues, but they're more intersectional. You actually consider more types of issues that could make you not climb the corporate ladder like liberal feminism seeks to do it. It's not that easy, basically. I will add also, with this talk of defining feminism, it's true, if you just say feminism, it might be too broad. And so I think a good way I try to understand it is simply trying to end the idea of male domination or the domination of a masculinized figure. So anyone who emulates any type of masculine like identity, or even like, you know, strong male I don't know, personality types. Um, those are the people that are generally celebrated. And why do we do that, right? And why do we do that in the workplace? And why should I be this cold, distanced leader, right? And why is that masculinized in the first place? So that's kind of what feminism, especially, you know, feminism in the way we're talking about in the workplace is important, I think. So I personally don't understand why it would be an issue, but obviously, if you talk about liberal feminism, there's issues.
Well, that was really great breakdown of it. So I would like to kind of go from that to Jen, ask you, how have you seen those differences show up in real workplaces, especially for women who hold multiple marginalized identities?
That's a good question. That's a good question. So I'm a social worker, and the work that I do tends to be dominated by women.
Mhm.
Right? So every workplace that I've been in traditionally has been led by women. So I haven't worked in a number of workplaces where where feminist principles, let's say, or feminist thought wasn't at the forefront, right? Until recently, I mean, I worked recently at King's University College. Maybe I shouldn't have said the name. I don't know. Well, no, but I mean, it's good. It's good. It's good. There was nothing wrong, but there I saw more of the old school type of thing, and it's not necessarily that institution. It's just the institution of a university is
Mhm.
old school, right? The way and changing the way they do things. Is slow moving, very slow moving. So I'm not sure if I'm able to really answer that question from my own experience, because I have traditionally been in workplaces where it's dominated by women and feminist thought.
Mel, have you had the experience?
Yeah, like I think so. I'm the opposite. I've worked in almost solely male dominated industries. But you know what? If to use a good example, I think of, how does it show up? If I even take an example of a workplace that I had, that I would say it was one of the most accepting workplaces. They really they loved ton of women in leadership. They loved, there was a lot of women executives and all of these things. And they were a really accepting workplace, like sexuality was accepted, all of those things. And if you dug deeper, and now being on the outside, um, I think there were a lot of women who were being paid less than what they would have been paid had they been in for working for a different organization. And I think that was just an accepted behavior, that probably didn't equal pay for equal work. I think you saw a lot of women at the top who didn't have children,
Mhm.
because it was still systemically, the executives were working, like I was working 100-hour weeks. Um, and so that sort of brings around that whole concept of how does the system, right? Like what's the role of the system in it? And I think we see it show up in the environment, right? Like we see it show up in, what are my opportunities? Do I what values do I have to decide on, like if I'm going to move up the corporate ladder, so to speak, compared to if I don't want to. Like there's so many nuances to that. And I think that's how it shows up at work, right? And in these workplaces is it, like, are we actually seeing true change? Or is it that, you fit in with how we do things and then there's opportunity. But if you don't, then the opportunity changes. Or like, again, I always say for myself, the reason I could do what I did, was because I had a partner who was very comfortable essentially being a stay-at-home dad.
Exactly what I was going to say. Same story. I had a partner that was, well, kind of was forced to take the back seat because he got laid off. But so then I kind of flipped the tables. And the only reason why I was able to progress in that way and still have a young child was because he was okay with that. But without that, I don't know that I would have made it through the system in that way, because it's not built for that.
Yeah.
You know,
Go ahead, Jen.
So I was going to say, women have not really been in the workforce for even 100 years yet, right? We have not been in the workforce for more than two generations, maybe, right? And so when we look at that and we look at um how what the workforce was, and now women are in and just being plopped in it, it's kind of like round hole square peg, right? It's like it doesn't fit because the system hasn't changed. And so that's why we see a lot of different issues come up, because it's a systemic thing,
Mhm.
right? It was made for a certain, men dominated the workforce. They created the policies and the procedures and all of those kinds of things because it was for them, right? Then now we have women entering in, and it's like, well, these are the policies, these are the procedures, this is what it is. And
So it's always been.
that's how it's always been. So now it doesn't fit unless
Well,
women change the way their trajectory, because they talked about this in the podcast as well, that women now are getting married later, having children later, doing a whole bunch of things later so that they can get to a certain place within their careers.
well, and I think Faustina mentioned it a little bit when she was talking about the sort of the different types of feminism. But I think, and I talk about this a lot in the sense that until we change, until we change what home looks like, I think we're going to continue to have this conversation, because the reality is, and I don't have the stat off the top of my head, but it's a crazy stat. Like I think it's like 80% of household work is still done by women, like caretaking activities and things like that. So until that changes, this conversation is still going to be something. Like we know we're seeing women exit executive positions faster than they've ever exited before. Why? Because they're tired, because they're still taking care of kids, they're taking care of their parents now, and all those things. They're exhausted.
Sandwich generation, yeah.
Yeah, right. So like we're seeing these things happen, but so much, in my mind, I believe so much of it still stems from division of labor outside of the workforce.
Mhm.
Just to add an intersectional lens.
Yeah.
If you think about the women that, don't do this and they still have, they're able to do it all. They seem like they're, these superheroes, superhuman people that have kids, have everything, are an executive level. And they typically sometimes will be hiring migrant workers, migrant domestic workers who are exploited for their visas, or in an exploitative, document wise in a visa system. They're not secure in that. They have low wages and they send remittances to their families abroad. And they just live in their houses, and I've met a lot of people like that. And so taking an intersectional lens, even if you were to fix it and say, okay, now you have time to go and do everything, it's because you're stepping on the backs of people that
Right.
still don't have that.
Right. That's a great point. And I think that is something I think about too, because it can look different in different ways. Like here we are stepping on migrants' backs, but even in our workplaces, sometimes I do feel like everyone fought, right, for the rights that are there. But we spoke to this a little bit earlier with feminism. People did get left behind, even though they were a part of the big fight, and they're stepped on to get up. I've experienced that as well in the corporate space, and so it's not just how feminism, the biggest part of it blames the man, but like we have to look at ourselves too. How are we handling each other as women, right? But we could go into that like in
That's a whole other podcast, Shirley. Well, and yeah, and I think to give sort of a real work example that I've used before, I worked in insurance for a period of time, and the insurance, like it's measured by book value, right? Like what's your book worth? And so there's kind of this unwritten rule that you're supposed to have $1 million book, like that's just the number. And so in order to get that, it involves long hours and lots of evenings out and golf course days and all the things. Golf course weekend, that's a whole other conversation part we can add into. But all of those things. And I used to challenge, because in insurance, for the most part, if you're in sales and insurance, you're working off commission. And so I started to challenge this whole concept, and I said, well, why couldn't we have 4 women who all have $250,000 books while they raise their children? Because if like that is the hindrance to doing these hours and to doing all these extras. So why does it need to be, if they're satisfied making $100,000 a year, why do we say they need to make $500,000 a year or $400,000 a year? Like, why is that, like, why are we deciding that for them? And then recognizing that what I saw as the opportunity was that this would give them that much more experience in the business. And then once the kids were out, like older and doing their own thing and everything else, and if she then chose, now I'm ready to do those hours, that what would probably happen is she would probably end up with a $2 million book, because she'd have 12 years of referrals and 12 years of knowledge and 12 years of experience and all these things. But again, to what Jen said, like it was a system built by men. Somebody decided this arbitrary number, and then the whole system was just built around it. And it's challenging that system.
Right. That's what I was going to say. I think that where, if we had to say where feminism might have fell off a bit, is that we tried to come in and be like the men versus, hey, this is our path, and this is a path we want to challenge the system and make it so it fits for all of us. Because that's not an unreasonable ask. It might take some work to make this happen the way that you described it, but I think that is the big part, that when I look at it, bringing unique ideas to the table of how we as women can lead and still fit into the organization, as opposed to the only way you can fit is if you lead like we do. Yeah. But we are almost at our time for today. So I'm going to squeeze like 1 or 2 more questions in, and we're just going to end up having to have a part 2. I'm sure everybody will be here for it. So let me see. I'm going to, Mel, I did have a question for you, even though I know you talked a lot just now, but I do think it's important. And you kind of touched on this a little bit, but officially, when leaders believe they're advancing women, but still replicate old systems, would you say that liberal feminism is in practice in that moment?
Well, I think if we're defining liberal feminism as from that standpoint of, it is just giving women opportunity in the workplace, then technically they're giving a group of women opportunity in the workplace. I don't think we're giving if we look at that intersectional lens, we're not giving access to everybody, because that would very much limit it to people like you and I, Shirley, who might have husbands at home who can do these things, or like I think it's a performative way of creating access in the workplace.
Right. And it just led me into my next, and it'll be our last question for the day. And this is for anyone to answer. We'll give Melissa a break. So, so Jen or Fox, what does it really take to move from performative awareness to real systemic change?
Release of power.
I know we can't cover everything. What are your thoughts?
You might need to say that again and louder.
Release of power, being willing to share power, and that's essentially what it's going to come down to, right? Yeah, I'll stop there because I could go on, and we don't have time. I'll do that for the part 2, but yeah, release of power.
Release of power. Okay, and we'll pick back up on that in part 2. What about you, Faustina?
I think with performative activism and performative awareness in the workplace, a big thing is tokenization. I'll try to say it quickly, but tokenizing people of color, tokenizing people with disabilities, tokenizing women in general, or even gay men, like just tokenizing anyone who is of any marginalized identity in society, and having them there as kind of this, shiny item that makes us equitable as a business. I think there's a real problem with that. And I think that's what people then see as bad wokeness, which is totally wrong. And then it, defeats the purpose of feminism. So I'll leave it at that.
Part two, we got to get into this term of woke and
Yes.
why
I agree.
why it's such a negative thing. Like, why is it bad that you want to be inclusive? Why is it bad that you want to provide opportunity for everyone and not just a certain group? How is that a problem?
I have so many thoughts about
So
that.
many, so many.
Well, listen,
Well,
so
And how did it change? Like when, because it flipped, because woke was at one point in time, and I'm not cool enough to ever be at the age where I was cool enough to say woke, but woke was, but woke was a good thing at some point.
Yeah, it was.
and we were talking about this the other day, and we're not going to go too deep in here, but to me, wokeness is like a form of empathy. So,
Yeah.
and I think that is what's lacking in general, which is why we're in the state that we're in right now as a whole at the moment. It's a lack of empathy. And I think wokeness was a way to show that, like put action to that, right? But it's really fascinating with everything we talked about so far, how especially the last few minutes, how easily inclusion can become like a checklist instead of a culture shift. So when we come back for part two, we are going to actually take this a little bit deeper into what the article talked about with feminization linked to what is called wokeness. And so we'll be back next time for that. We thank you all for being here with us for today's session, and we'll see you again next time.
Bye.
Bye.